Case 1. Velma Margie Barfield was a woman from North Carolina whose execution became an important part of United States history. Velma Barfield was the first woman in U.S. history to be executed by lethal injection and the first woman executed after the death penalty returned in 1976. Her case is remembered because it involved poisonings inside homes and workplaces, places where people felt safe. Velma Barfield was born on October 29, 1932 in North Carolina. Her early life was hard. She grew up poor and left school early. As an adult, she married and had children, but her marriages were troubled. Her first husband died by suicide. Her second husband, Jennings Barfield, became very sick and died in 1971. Years later, investigators found arsenic in his remains. Velma Barfield denied killing him, and she was never charged with his death. Still, this discovery raised serious questions about her past. Velma Barfield later trained and worked as a nurse's aide. This job involved caring for elderly and sick people. Many families trusted her with their loved ones. During this time, several people under her care became ill and died. Her mother also died after becoming sick. Doctors later found that these deaths were caused by arsenic poisoning, a deadly substance that can be hidden in food and drinks. Velma Barfield later admitted that she had poisoned some of these people. In 1978, Velma Barfield was living with her boyfriend, Stuart Taylor. He suddenly became very sick and died. Tests showed arsenic in his body. Police investigated and arrested Velma Barfield. During questioning, she confessed to poisoning Stuart Taylor and admitted to poisoning other people as well. She said she had a serious addiction to prescription drugs and needed money to support it. A jury found her guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Stuart Taylor. She was sentenced to death later that year. Although Velma Barfield confessed to 4 murders, she was legally sentenced only for the murder of Stuart Taylor. Her case went through appeals, but the courts upheld her conviction and sentence. While in prison, she became deeply religious. She spoke openly about her crimes and said she accepted responsibility for the harm she caused. Some religious leaders and supporters asked the governor of North Carolina to change her sentence to life in prison. The governor reviewed the case and denied clemency. On November 2, 1984, Velma Barfield spent her final hours at Central Prison. Records and news reports note that her last meal request was cheese doodles and a Coca-Cola. Before the execution, she made a short statement saying she was sorry for the pain she caused to others. She was then executed by lethal injection. Case 2. Carla Faye Tucker's execution placed her among a very small number of women executed in the United States in modern history. She became one of the most widely discussed female death row prisoners because of the crime she committed, the long time she spent in prison, and the national debate that followed her case. Her story remains an important part of the history of women executed in the United States. Carla Faye Tucker was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. Her early life was troubled. She struggled with drug use and unstable living conditions while still very young. By her early 20s, her life had become chaotic. In June 1983, when she was 23 years old, she took part in a brutal crime inside an apartment in Houston. 2 people were killed, Jerry Dean, a man she knew, and Dorothy Thornton, his partner. The crime shocked the community and drew strong reactions because of its violence. Police arrested Tucker soon after the killings, and she later admitted her role. Carla Faye Tucker went on trial in 1984 in Harris County, Texas. During the trial, the jury heard details about the crime and her background. At that time, Texas law allowed the death penalty for capital murder. The jury found her guilty and sentenced her to death. She became one of only a few women on death row in the United States. The sentence meant she would remain in prison under strict conditions while waiting for her execution date to be set. Carla Faye Tucker spent about 14 years on death row. During those years, she changed in ways that many people noticed. She became deeply religious while in prison and spoke often about feeling sorry for her actions. She followed prison rules and worked closely with religious counselors. Some prison staff members said she showed kindness and calm behavior. Even some people connected to the victims said she no longer seemed like the same person who committed the crime. Her case gained national attention during the 1990s as people debated whether the death sentence should be changed to life in prison. Karla Faye Tucker asked for clemency, which means asking the governor to stop an execution. At the time, the governor of Texas was George W. Bush. Religious leaders, public figures, and citizens from across the country asked for her life to be spared. Others argued that the sentence should remain because of the seriousness of the crime. After reviewing the case, clemency was denied. The courts also rejected her final appeals. This decision cleared the way for the execution to proceed. Karla Faye Tucker was executed on the evening of February 3, 1998, at the Huntsville unit in Texas. She was 38 years old. Her execution made history because she was the first woman executed in Texas since 1863 during the Civil War era. News outlets across the country covered the event. Supporters held vigils, while others defended the sentence. Her death reopened national conversations about punishment, mercy, and whether people can truly change over time. Before we move to the next case, if you enjoy true crime videos, this is the right channel for you. I post interesting videos on the channel daily. Please support my channel by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much. Case 3. Judy Buenoano's case is part of the history of women executed in the United States. What makes her story important is that her crimes happened slowly and involved people very close to her. For many years, the deaths around her were believed to be accidents or illness. Careful testing later showed the truth. Judy Buenoano was born in 1943 and lived in several states before settling in Florida. To people around her, she appeared normal and quiet. She worked, dated, and raised a family. But over time, people close to her began to die or become very sick. Her husband, James Goodyear, was a U.S. Air Force sergeant. In 1971, he became very ill and died. Doctors at the time believed he died from natural causes. Years later, his body was examined again. Tests showed arsenic poisoning. Investigators found evidence that Judy had been giving him poison over time. After his death, she collected life insurance money. Judy Buenoano later harmed her son, Michael Goodyear, who was 19 years old. In 1980, she took him on a canoe trip in Florida. Michael fell into the water and drowned. Judy said it was an accident. Much later, medical tests showed Michael had arsenic in his body before his death. This meant he was already weak when he entered the water. After her son died, Judy again collected insurance money. Another man connected to Judy Buenoano also died. In 1978, her boyfriend Bobby Joe Morris passed away in Colorado. At the time, his death was believed to be from illness. Years later, his body was exhumed. Tests showed arsenic poisoning, similar to the other deaths connected to Judy. Investigators linked her to his death, but she was never tried for this crime because she was already under a death sentence in Florida. In 1983, Judy Buenoano harmed another boyfriend, John Gentry. His car exploded after she asked him to drive it. He survived, but suffered severe internal injuries to his intestines, liver, kidney, and pancreas. He did not lose a leg. During the investigation, police discovered that Judy had given Gentry vitamin capsules. Testing showed these capsules contained paraformaldehyde, a toxic disinfectant. Some reports also mentioned arsenic in the capsules, but paraformaldehyde was a key piece of evidence. Investigators connected the chemical to products used in a beauty salon, which helped link the poisoning directly to Judy. The car bombing caused police to take a closer look at Judy's past. When investigators reviewed earlier deaths connected to her, they saw a clear pattern. Court records showed that Judy Buenoano collected about $240,000 in insurance money from the deaths of her husband, her son, and her boyfriends. In 1985, a jury found Judy Buenoano guilty of murder for the death of James Goodyear. She was sentenced to death. Over the next many years, her case went through reviews in state and federal courts. Each court upheld her conviction and sentence. On March 30, 1998, Florida carried out the execution. Judy Buenoano was 54 years old. She became the first woman executed by Florida since 1848. Case 4. Betty Lou Beets, born on March 12, 1937. Her early life was difficult, and her adult life was marked by repeated marriages and constant conflict. She was married 6 times to 5 different men. One man, Billy York Lane, was her second husband, and she married and divorced him twice. Over the years, her marriages often ended badly, with friends and relatives later describing her homes as places filled with fear and control. By the early 1980s, Betty Lou Beets was living in Gun Barrel City, Texas. She was married to her 5th husband, Jimmy Don Beets. On August 6, 1983, Jimmy Don Beets disappeared. Betty told people that he had left her and would not return. For some time, no one openly challenged her story, and life around the home appeared to continue as normal. What finally brought police attention to her property was the disappearance of Doyle Wayne Barker, her 4th husband. Barker had gone missing years earlier, and questions about his fate never fully went away. In 1985, officers investigating Barker's disappearance searched Betty Lou Beets' property. During that search, they made a disturbing discovery. 2 sets of human remains were found buried on the land. One body was buried under a storage shed and was identified as Doyle Wayne Barker. Another body was found buried in the yard and was identified as Jimmy Don Beets. Evidence showed that both men had been shot. Investigators also uncovered financial records showing that after Jimmy Don Beets disappeared, Betty Lou Beets continued using his money and property. She kept his truck, handled financial matters connected to him, and acted as though he was no longer part of her life. This evidence became central to the case. In 1985, she was arrested and charged with capital murder for the killing of Jimmy Don Beets. Her trial took place later in 1985 in Henderson County, Texas. Prosecutors told the jury that she killed for money and control. The defense argued that her life had been shaped by abuse and fear. After hearing the evidence, the jury found her guilty. During the punishment phase of the trial, the jury decided she should receive the death penalty. She was then sent to death row in Texas. Betty Lou Beets spent more than 14 years on death row. During that time, her lawyers filed several appeals. They argued that her trial lawyers failed to fully explain her background, mental condition, and life history to the jury. These appeals were reviewed by state and federal courts. Each court upheld the conviction and the sentence. Over the years, execution dates were set and delayed, but none of the legal efforts stopped the sentence. On the evening of February 24, 2000, Betty Lou Beets was taken to the execution chamber. She was executed by lethal injection at 6:18 p.m. Central Time. Her execution made her the second woman executed in Texas in the modern era. Case 5. Christina Marie Riggs was a woman from Arkansas whose execution became a clear and carefully documented moment in U.S. history. Her case is remembered because it involved a young mother, 2 small children, serious mental health struggles, and rare legal milestones that still matter today. Christina Marie Riggs was born on September 2, 1971. She trained as a licensed practical nurse and worked in healthcare. For many years, people close to her said she suffered from deep depression. By 1997, she was living in Sherwood, Arkansas, and raising her 2 children alone. Her children were Justin Dalton Thomas, age 5, and Shelby Alexis Riggs, age 2. Court records later explained that Christina feared what she believed would happen to her children after she planned to take her own life. She believed they would be burdened, separated, and raised apart by their fathers. This fear was described in court as a central reason for her actions. On November 4, 1997, Christina Marie Riggs killed both children inside their home. Evidence presented in court showed she first gave them medication, believing it would make them fall asleep and die peacefully. When this did not happen, she used physical force that caused their deaths. After killing her children, she attempted to take her own life by taking a large amount of medication. She did not die. About 19 hours later, Christina's mother went to the home and found her unconscious. Emergency workers took Christina to the hospital. Doctors treated her and saved her life. The following day, after she was released from medical care, police arrested her immediately. She was placed into custody and later charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Christina's trial took place in 1998. During the trial, she admitted responsibility for killing her children. Mental health experts spoke about her long history of depression. Even with this information, the jury found her guilty under Arkansas law. On June 30, 1998, Christina Marie Riggs was sentenced to death. After sentencing, she made a decision that set her case apart from many others. She chose to give up most appeals and did not seek long delays in higher courts. She said she accepted responsibility for what she had done. While waiting for execution, Christina Marie Riggs was held on death row at the McPherson Unit, the prison where female death row inmates in Arkansas were housed. 2 days before the execution, she was transferred to the Cummins Unit, where executions are carried out. This transfer followed standard prison procedure. On the evening of May 2, 2000, Christina Marie Riggs was executed by lethal injection at the Cummins Unit. Prison records show her time of death was 9:28 p.m. She was 28 years old, making her the youngest woman executed in the modern era of the U.S. death penalty. Her final words were simple and direct. Her verified last statement was, "I love you, my babies." If you found this video interesting so far, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for your support. Case 6. Wanda Jean Allen was the first woman ever executed in Oklahoma. Her case drew strong public attention because it involved earlier killings, questions about mental ability, and intense debate before her death. Wanda Jean Allen was born on August 17, 1959, in Oklahoma. Her childhood was very difficult. She struggled badly in school and did not learn at the same pace as other children. Her lawyers later said she suffered brain damage during childhood. When she was a teenager, testing showed her IQ was about 69, which her defense said placed her in the range of intellectual disability. This became a major issue later in her life. During the clemency process, prosecutors pointed to a later IQ test from the mid-1990s, which showed a score of around 80. They argued this meant she was more mentally capable than her lawyers claimed. The difference between these scores became one of the most debated parts of her case. Before the crime that led to her execution, Wanda Jean Allen had already killed someone. In 1981, she shot and killed a childhood friend named Deidre Pettis. Evidence showed Pettis had been hit with a gun and shot at very close range based on powder burn findings. Even though the evidence suggested a deliberate act, Allen accepted a manslaughter plea and served time in prison. Under Oklahoma law, this conviction counted as a prior violent felony. This legal detail later became essential because it allowed the jury in her next case to legally recommend the death penalty. While in prison, Wanda Jean Allen met Gloria Leathers. The two women formed a romantic relationship while they were both incarcerated. After their release, they continued the relationship on the outside. Their time together was troubled and filled with arguments. Friends and family members later described the relationship as unstable and tense. On June 7, 1988, Gloria Leathers went to the Village Police Department in Oklahoma City to file a complaint against Allen. As Leathers exited her car outside the police station, Wanda Jean Allen approached her. Allen later claimed the shooting was accidental or done in self-defense. However, eyewitnesses, including Leathers' mother, said Allen shot Leathers at close range as she stepped out of the vehicle. Forensic evidence supported the witnesses and did not show signs of a struggle at the moment the gun was fired. Gloria Leathers died at the scene. Police arrested Wanda Jean Allen immediately. She was charged with first-degree murder. Her trial took place in 1989. Prosecutors presented eyewitness testimony, forensic findings, and details of her past violence. The jury was told about her 1981 manslaughter conviction, which legally qualified as a prior violent felony aggravating factor. This factor was crucial under Oklahoma law. Without it, the jury could not have recommended a death sentence. After hearing all the evidence, the jury found Allen guilty and sentenced her to death. Wanda Jean Allen spent more than 10 years on death row. During that time, her lawyers filed many appeals. They argued that she was intellectually disabled, that her trial lawyers failed to fully explain her mental limits, and that bias affected how her case was handled. Another major controversy came during her clemency hearing. Prosecutors told the clemency board that Allen had a high school diploma and college experience. Her lawyers said this was incorrect and argued it made her seem more mentally capable than she truly was. Despite these claims, courts rejected her appeals, and the governor denied clemency. Before her execution, Wanda Jean Allen experienced a religious conversion. She became a born-again Christian while in prison. This faith shaped how she behaved in her final days and influenced her last words. On January 11, 2001, Wanda Jean Allen entered the execution chamber. Witnesses said she appeared calm. Her final spoken words were, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Just before the execution began, witnesses also noted that she smiled and briefly stuck out her tongue toward her appeal lawyer, a small gesture that surprised those watching. She was executed by lethal injection shortly afterward. Case 7. Marilyn K. Plants was married to James Jim Plants. She took out a life insurance policy worth about $300,000 on him. Prosecutors showed that this money was the main reason behind the crime. Instead of carrying out the attack herself, Marilyn involved two young men who were close to her. They were William Clifford Bryson, age 18, and Clinton Eugene McKimble, age 18. Both were legally adults but still very young at the time. On August 26, 1988, Jim Plants was attacked inside his own home. Trial evidence showed that Marilyn K. Plants was inside the house during the attack. She had provided the baseball bats used in the beating. Bryson and McKimble struck Jim Plants repeatedly. He was badly injured but still alive. Prosecutors told the jury that Marilyn watched and realized the head injuries did not look like an accident. Because of this, Marilyn K. Plants gave a direct order. She told the two young men to burn him. Jim Plants was then placed into his own pickup truck. He was taken to a remote area. There, he was covered with gasoline and set on fire while still alive. He later died from his injuries. The crime was violent, planned, and carried out step by step. Police quickly began investigating. William Bryson and Clinton McKimble were arrested. During questioning, both young men explained Marilyn's role. They told investigators that she planned the attack, supplied the weapons, stayed present, and gave the final instruction to burn her husband. Their testimony was supported by physical evidence and other details from the scene. In 1989, Marilyn K. Plants went on trial for first-degree murder. The jury heard how the attack happened, why it happened, and who controlled it. The jury found her guilty. Because the killing was planned, involved hiring others, and was done for money, the court sentenced her to death. This death sentence came directly from the murder of Jim Plants. Marilyn K. Plants spent many years on death row. During this time, her case went through multiple appeals in state and federal courts. Judges reviewed the trial, the evidence, and the sentence. Each court upheld the verdict and the death sentence. No appeal overturned the ruling. On May 1, 2001, Oklahoma carried out the execution. Marilyn K. Plants was 40 years old at the time of her death. She became the second woman executed by the state of Oklahoma. Case 8. Lois Nadine Smith was born in 1940. For many years, she lived as a mother and grandmother. To people around her, she did not appear to be someone capable of serious violence. That image changed in 1982 when Cindy Bailey, a 21-year-old woman, was brutally killed. Cindy Bailey was the former girlfriend of Smith's son, Greg Smith. The relationship had ended, but tension remained. Court records show that Cindy Bailey was attacked inside her home in Sequoyah County, Oklahoma. The evidence revealed a shocking level of violence. She was shot 9 times, stabbed in the throat, and choked. The injuries showed that the attack was deliberate and prolonged. Investigators quickly ruled out any claim of accident or self-defense. The investigation revealed that Lois Nadine Smith did not act alone. Her son, Greg Smith, and another woman, Teresa Baker, also known as Teresa DeMoss, were present during the killing. According to court testimony, Greg Smith played an active role. When the gun ran out of bullets, he reloaded the pistol for his mother, allowing the attack to continue. Teresa Baker was also involved and later testified about what happened. Prosecutors said the motive centered on fear and control. Lois Nadine Smith believed that Cindy Bailey had threatened to report her son's drug activity to the police or have him harmed. Based on that belief, Smith decided to kill Bailey. Witness testimony and physical evidence supported the claim that Smith was the main attacker. Court records and news reports described a disturbing detail that became widely known. After firing several shots, Lois Nadine Smith reportedly laughed and jumped or stomped on Cindy Bailey's neck while her son reloaded the gun. Because of this cruelty, the media and legal observers began referring to her by the nickname Mean Nadine. That name followed her throughout the trial and appeals process. Lois Nadine Smith was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her trial took place in Sequoyah County, Oklahoma. During the trial, prosecutors laid out the full sequence of events and described the roles played by each person involved. The defense attempted to argue for mercy, but the jury rejected those arguments. Smith was found guilty. During sentencing, the jury chose the death penalty. Her son, Greg Smith, was also convicted for his role in the murder. Because of his involvement, including reloading the gun, he received a life sentence in prison. Teresa Baker received a separate sentence after cooperating with authorities. Lois Nadine Smith spent nearly 20 years on death row. During that time, her lawyers filed multiple appeals in state and federal courts. Each appeal challenged parts of the trial and the sentence. Every court reviewed the case and upheld the conviction and death sentence. None of the appeals changed the outcome. On December 4, 2001, Lois Nadine Smith was executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. Her execution carried special historical weight. She became the third woman executed in Oklahoma in 2001 alone. Case 9. Linda Lyon Block's execution method was the electric chair. Her case is remembered because it involved the killing of a police officer during a traffic stop, her refusal to take part in appeals, and her calm silence at the end of her life. Linda Lyon Block was born on February 8, 1948. As an adult, she lived a life marked by constant movement and deep distrust of government authority. She rejected the legitimacy of courts and laws, believing they had no power over her. These beliefs shaped her actions during her trial and later on death row. She was in a long-term relationship with George Sibley Jr., her common-law husband. The two lived together, traveled frequently, carried weapons, and avoided contact with police whenever possible. The crime that led to her death sentence occurred on October 4, 1993, near Opelika, Alabama. That day, Sergeant Roger Motley of the Opelika Police Department stopped a vehicle occupied by Linda Lyon Block and George Sibley Jr. What began as a traffic stop quickly turned violent. During the encounter, George Sibley Jr. fired shots that killed Sergeant Motley. Linda Lyon Block was armed and present throughout the confrontation. Sergeant Motley died from his injuries, leaving behind his family, fellow officers, and a community shaken by the loss. Both Linda Lyon Block and George Sibley Jr. were arrested and charged. Prosecutors brought capital murder charges because the victim was a law enforcement officer killed while performing his duty. At trial, the state argued that the pair acted together and shared responsibility. Under Alabama law, a person can receive the death penalty even without firing the fatal shot if they knowingly take part in the crime. The jury accepted this argument. Linda Lyon Block was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. After her conviction, Linda Lyon Block was sent to death row. Her behavior there made her case unusual. She refused to cooperate with her attorneys and rejected the legal process. She filed motions stating she did not recognize the authority of the courts and did not want to continue appeals. Judges became concerned about whether she understood the consequences of these choices. As a result, courts ordered mental competency evaluations. Doctors examined her and reported that she understood her situation and the result of giving up appeals. Courts ruled she was competent to make her own legal decisions. Because she chose not to pursue appeals, her case moved forward more quickly than most death row cases. Unlike many prisoners, she did not ask for mercy, delay, or intervention. She continued to refuse participation in court proceedings right up to the end. Her co-defendant, George Sibley Jr., remained on death row long after her execution. He was not executed until August 4, 2005, more than 3 years later, making their execution timeline clearly separate. On May 10, 2002, Linda Lyon Block was taken to the execution chamber at Holman Correctional Facility. Alabama used the electric chair, commonly known as Yellow Mama. According to official records from the Alabama Department of Corrections and witnesses present, she made no final statement. She did not speak, gesture, or react. Witnesses described her as blank and emotionless as the execution was carried out. Linda Lyon Block became the last woman executed by electric chair in the United States. Her execution is remembered not only because of the method used, but also because she chose silence and refused to take part in the final rituals often seen in executions. Case 10. Aileen Carol Wuornos was a woman whose life and crimes became one of the most well-known cases involving a woman sentenced to death in the United States. Her story is part of the history of women executed in U.S. history because of the number of victims, the long court process, and the public attention around her mental health and background. Aileen Carol Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her early life was unstable and painful. She was raised by her grandparents, who legally adopted her when she was very young. Court records and testimony later showed that her childhood home involved neglect, abuse, and emotional harm. From an early age, she ran away often and struggled to find safety. As she grew older, she experienced homelessness and lived on the streets for long periods of time. These early experiences shaped her adult life, but they did not excuse the crimes she later committed. As an adult, Aileen lived mostly in Florida. She survived by doing sex work and moving from place to place. Between 1989 and 1990, she killed 7 men. The victims were Richard Mallory, David Spears, Charles Carskadden, Charles Humphreys, Troy Burris, Peter Seams, and Walter Gino Antonio. Most of the men were shot with a handgun after meeting her along highways. Wuornos later said she was attacked and acted in self-defense. Prosecutors presented evidence showing robbery and planning in several cases. Juries accepted the prosecution's explanation rather than her self-defense claims. Aileen Carol Wuornos was arrested in January 1991 after police connected her to the murders through witness statements, pawnshop records, and physical evidence. Her court cases took place over several years. She was convicted of 6 murders and received 6 death sentences. One victim, Peter Seams, was never found, so she was not tried for that murder. During court proceedings, Wuornos often spoke directly to judges and lawyers and showed strong emotions. Mental health experts testified that she had serious psychological problems. Even so, courts ruled that she understood what she had done and was legally responsible under the law. While on death row, Wuornos spent more than 10 years in prison. Over time, she chose to stop most legal appeals. She said she did not want delays and wanted the execution to move forward. This decision caused strong debate across the country. Some people believed her mental health history should have prevented the execution. Others believed the law had been followed as written. Courts reviewed her mental condition close to the execution date and ruled that she met the legal standard for competency. On the night of October 9, 2002, Aileen Carol Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison in Starka, Florida. Her execution was carried out in the evening. Her final statement was unusual and carefully recorded. Her verified last words were, "I'd just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back like Independence Day, with Jesus, June 6th. Like the movie, big mothership and all, I'll be back." With her execution, Aileen Carol Wuornos became the 10th woman executed in the United States since 1976, when the modern death penalty era began. Case 11. Frances Elaine Newton lived in Houston, Texas, with her husband, Adrian Newton, and their 2 children. Just 3 weeks before the murders, Frances purchased life insurance policies worth $50,000 each. One policy covered Adrian, one covered their daughter, Farah, and one covered Frances herself. Some court records describe the total potential payout as $100,000 based on the policies for Adrian and Farah. Frances admitted that she forged Adrian's signature on the insurance forms. She said she did this to keep the family's financial planning private. Prosecutors argued that the timing of these policies showed a clear financial motive. On April 7, 1987, a deadly shooting happened inside the family's apartment. All 3 family members present were killed. Adrian Newton was shot and died at the scene. Their daughter, Farah, who was 7 years old, was shot and killed. Their son Alton, who was 21 months old, was also shot and killed. There were no survivors. Police arrived and began an immediate investigation. From the start, Frances Elaine Newton said she did not kill her family. She told police that Adrian was a drug addict who owed money to a dealer known as Charlie. She said this debt put the family in danger and that someone else carried out the killings. Prosecutors rejected this explanation and instead focused on the insurance policies and other evidence. During the investigation, police recovered a .25 caliber Raven pistol. The gun was found at a relative's abandoned home, where witnesses said Frances had placed a bag. Prosecutors said ballistics testing showed that bullets recovered from the victims matched this gun. Frances said she found the gun in the apartment after the shootings and hid it because she was afraid and wanted it away from children. Court records show the prosecution maintained that no second gun was ever recovered. However, Frances Elaine Newton's later defense team claimed that early police paperwork appeared to list a second .25 caliber pistol at the scene. This led them to argue that the wrong gun may have been tested. Courts reviewed this claim, but ruled that it did not change the verdict. Prosecutors also relied on forensic testing involving a skirt Frances Elaine Newton wore that night. Tests showed nitrites, which were presented at trial as gun-related residue. Years later, experts acknowledged that nitrites are not unique to gun use and can also come from common garden fertilizer. Evidence showed one of the children had been playing in a garden earlier that day. No residue was found on Frances's hands or sweater, which some experts said would be expected if she had fired a gun multiple times. In 2004, the skirt was supposed to be retested using newer methods, but it was found to be contaminated, making reliable retesting impossible. The trial took place in 1988. Frances Elaine Newton's lawyer, Ron Mock, later became a major focus of concern. He called no witnesses, conducted no independent investigation, and did not pursue the drug debt claim. Years later, Ron Mock was barred from handling death penalty cases because of a history of poor performance in other trials. After the trial, a relative of Frances, who was in jail at the time, later provided a sworn statement. The relative said a cellmate bragged about killing the Newton family to collect a drug debt. Courts ruled this evidence was procedurally barred or insufficient to overturn the conviction. The jury found Frances Elaine Newton guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to death. She spent 17 years on death row. Throughout that time, her attorneys said she never wavered in her claim of innocence. Courts reviewed challenges about the evidence, forensic testing, and legal defense, but all appeals were denied. On September 14, 2005, Texas carried out the execution. Frances Elaine Newton was 40 years old. She became the first woman executed in Texas since 1962 and the first black woman executed in Texas since 1853. Official records from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice show that she declined to make a final verbal statement on the gurney. Case 12. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis's case is part of the history of women executed in the United States, and it became one of the most closely examined because she did not fire the gun herself. Her story is often used to explain how rare it is for women to receive the death penalty and how complex these cases can be. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis was born on April 26, 1969 in Virginia. She lived a simple life and worked regular jobs. Many people described her as quiet and soft-spoken. In November 2002, her life became tied to a serious crime that shocked her community. The crime took place in the rural community of Keeling, Pittsylvania County, Virginia. Inside a family home, 2 people were killed while they slept. The victims were Julian Lewis, her husband, and Charles Lewis, her stepson. Charles Lewis was a U.S. Army reservist who was preparing for deployment to Iraq. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis did not carry out the shootings herself. Investigators said the killings were done by 2 men, Matthew Schallenberger and Rodney Fuller. Prosecutors argued that Teresa planned the murders and helped the men gain access to the house. According to court records, the main reason presented by the state was money. A key part of the case involved a $250,000 life insurance policy held by Charles Lewis. Prosecutors said Teresa believed she would benefit from this policy after his death. This detail became central to the case and was repeated throughout the trial and appeals. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis was arrested and charged with capital murder. In 2003, she pleaded guilty in a Virginia court. The judge sentenced her to death. This sentence caused strong reactions because the two men who carried out the shootings were not sentenced to death. Rodney Fuller received a life sentence in prison. Matthew Schallenberger, whom Teresa's lawyers later argued was the true leader in the crime, also received a life sentence. In 2006, while serving his sentence, Matthew Schallenberger died by suicide in prison. This later became an important detail discussed by critics of Teresa's death sentence. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis spent several years on death row while her legal team filed appeals. One major issue raised during this time involved her mental ability. Testing showed she had very low intellectual functioning. Her lawyers argued that she had serious limitations and that she was easily influenced by others. They said this should have mattered during sentencing. Religious leaders, advocacy groups, and members of the public asked that her sentence be changed to life in prison. Many people focused on the fact that she was not the shooter and that the gunman received lesser punishments. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis asked for clemency. At the time, the governor of Virginia was Bob McDonnell. He reviewed the case, including the trial record, the appeals, and the arguments about her mental ability. After this review, clemency was denied. The courts also rejected her final appeals. Once these decisions were made, the execution date was set. Teresa Wilson Bean Lewis was executed on September 23, 2010 at Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. She was 41 years old. Her execution made history because she was the first woman executed in Virginia since 1912. News outlets across the country reported on her death. Outside the prison, people gathered to speak for and against the execution. The case once again brought national attention to how the death penalty is applied. Case 13. Kimberly LaGale McCarthy was the fourth woman executed in Texas since 1976 and the 13th woman executed in the United States during that same period. Her case drew wide attention because of the extreme violence of the crime, multiple trials, and long legal fights before her execution. Kimberly McCarthy was born on May 11, 1961, in Texas. Her life was unstable from a young age. She struggled in school and later became involved with drugs. As an adult, she often moved from place to place and did not have a steady life. These problems followed her for many years and were raised by her lawyers during court proceedings, though they did not stop her execution. The crime that led to her death sentence happened on July 21, 1997 in Lancaster, Texas, in Dallas County. The victim was Dorothy Booth, a 71-year-old retired college professor. On that day, McCarthy went to Booth's apartment and asked to borrow a cup of sugar, using this request as a way to gain entry into the home. Once inside, the situation turned deadly. Dorothy Booth was attacked inside her own apartment. Evidence showed she was stabbed 5 times with a butcher knife and also beaten with a candelabrum. During the robbery, McCarthy took Booth's wedding ring. To remove it, Booth's finger was severed. The crime shocked investigators because of the level of violence used against an elderly woman inside her home. Police began investigating and soon focused on Kimberly McCarthy. Witnesses said she was later seen with Booth's wedding ring. Prosecutors said the killing happened during a robbery. McCarthy denied killing Booth. She was arrested and charged with capital murder. Kimberly McCarthy's first trial in 1998 ended with a conviction and a death sentence. However, in 2001, that conviction was overturned. Courts ruled that a confession used during the trial was taken after McCarthy had asked for a lawyer, which violated her rights. Because of this legal error, the conviction could not stand. In 2002, McCarthy was retried. During this second trial, prosecutors again presented evidence about the crime scene, the wedding ring, and witness testimony. The jury found her guilty of capital murder and again sentenced her to death. This second conviction became the final sentence that kept her on death row. During the sentencing phase, prosecutors also introduced DNA evidence linking McCarthy to the murders of 2 other elderly women. Maggie Harding, age 81, who was killed in 1988, and Jetty Lucas, age 85, also killed in 1988. McCarthy was never tried or convicted for those 2 killings, but the DNA evidence was used to show a pattern of violence and played a role in the jury's decision to impose the death penalty. Kimberly McCarthy spent more than 10 years on death row. Her lawyers filed many appeals. While her background and mental ability were discussed, the main legal fight near the end of her case focused on racial bias in jury selection. Her defense argued that 11 of the 12 jurors were white and that black jurors were unfairly excluded. Courts reviewed these claims but rejected them, allowing the execution to move forward. On June 26, 2013, Kimberly McCarthy was brought into the execution chamber. Witnesses said she appeared calm. Before the lethal injection was given, she spoke her final words. She said, "This is not a loss, this is a win. You know where I'm going. I'm going home to be with Jesus. Keep the faith. I love you all." She was then executed by lethal injection. Case 14. Suzanne Margaret Basso's execution made her the 5th woman executed in Texas since 1976, and the 14th woman executed in the United States during that same modern period. Suzanne Margaret Basso was born on May 15, 1954. As an adult, she often told people she could not walk and used a wheelchair in public. Later evidence showed this was not true. Prosecutors would eventually show video recordings proving she could walk normally. This became important at trial because it showed she was capable of controlling others and carrying out abuse. In August 1998, Basso became involved in the death of Louis Buddy Musso, a 59-year-old man from New Jersey. Musso had an intellectual disability and received government benefits. Suzanne Basso and others contacted him and convinced him to move to Texas. He was promised care, a place to live, and help managing his money. Trusting those promises, Musso left New Jersey and moved into Basso's home in Montgomery County, Texas. What Musso experienced inside the house was nothing like what he was promised. Court records showed that he was kept inside the home, denied enough food, and physically abused over time. He was treated as someone to control, not someone to help. Suzanne Basso took control of Musso's Social Security income and used the money for herself. Other people living in the home helped or stood by while the abuse continued. Musso's health grew worse as the abuse continued. In August 1998, he died inside the home. Medical findings showed his death was caused by long-term abuse and neglect. Authorities ruled his death a homicide. When police learned what had happened, they began an investigation. Witness statements, medical evidence, and financial records all pointed to Suzanne Basso as the main person in charge. Suzanne Basso was arrested and charged with capital murder. Her case went to trial in 1999. During the trial, prosecutors explained how Musso had been lured to Texas, how his money was taken, and how he was abused until his death. Jurors heard testimony from people who lived in the home. Prosecutors also presented video evidence showing Basso walking, which contradicted her claims of being unable to move. After hearing all the evidence, the jury found Suzanne Margaret Basso guilty of capital murder. During the punishment phase, the jury decided she should receive the death penalty. Other people involved in the abuse received prison sentences, but Basso was seen as the leader and main decision-maker. She was sent to death row in Texas. Suzanne Basso spent more than 14 years on death row. During that time, her lawyers filed multiple appeals in state and federal courts. These appeals challenged her conviction and sentence. Judges reviewed the trial record, the evidence, and the legal arguments. Every court upheld the conviction and the death sentence. None of the appeals changed the outcome. On February 5, 2014, Suzanne Margaret Basso was taken to the execution chamber at the Huntsville unit. She was executed by lethal injection. Her execution came less than a year after the execution of Kimberly McCarthy in June 2013, marking a rare period when Texas executed more than one woman within a short span of time. Case 15. Lisa Ann Coleman's case is remembered because it involved extreme abuse of a child, complex legal questions, and a rare execution of a woman in modern U.S. history. This script reflects verified court records and medical testimony, written in clear and simple language. Lisa Ann Coleman was born on November 18, 1969. As an adult, she lived in Texas and was in a relationship with Marcella Williams, the mother of a young boy named Devontae Williams. Devontae was 9 years old. Coleman lived in the home and exercised daily control over the child. Because of this role, Texas law treated her as responsible for his safety, care, and basic needs. What took place inside that home later became the center of a capital murder case. Court records showed that Devonte Williams suffered extreme neglect and abuse over a long period of time. When emergency workers saw him, he weighed only 35 to 36 pounds, which doctors explained was about half the normal weight for a healthy 9-year-old child. Medical experts testified that this level of weight loss could only happen after long-term starvation. Devonte was often denied food and water and kept isolated from others. Doctors and investigators testified that Devonte had more than 250 separate injuries on his body. These included bruises, scars, cigarette burns, and ligature marks, which are injuries caused by being tied or restrained. Testimony explained that he was frequently confined inside the home, locked in a pantry or bathroom, and restrained with extension cords as punishment. Medical experts told the jury these injuries showed repeated harm over time, not accidents or normal discipline. In July 2004, Devonte collapsed and died. Medical examiners explained that the primary cause of death was starvation and severe malnutrition. Records also showed that pneumonia played a contributing role. Doctors testified that his body was so weakened by long-term abuse and lack of nutrition that he could not fight infection. The combination of starvation, neglect, and illness led to his death. After Devonte's death, investigators questioned the adults in the home. Early explanations did not match the medical findings. Police and child protection workers continued their investigation using physical evidence and expert testimony. Lisa Ann Coleman was arrested and charged with capital murder. Prosecutors argued that her actions showed cruelty and control rather than care or discipline. Devonte's mother, Marcella Williams, was also charged. She later accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to life in prison. Court records show she is eligible for parole in 2044. Her plea allowed prosecutors to move forward with the death penalty case against Lisa Ann Coleman. A major legal issue in the case involved the charge of kidnapping. Prosecutors argued that restraining Devonte with cords and locking him inside rooms met the legal definition of kidnapping under Texas law. Coleman's lawyers argued that punishment inside the home should not count as kidnapping. Multiple appeals courts reviewed this argument. Each court upheld the kidnapping charge, ruling that restraining and confining a child in this way was illegal, even inside their own home. This ruling made the case important in Texas legal history. At trial, jurors heard testimony from doctors, investigators, and experts who explained the injuries, starvation, confinement, and illness. The jury found Lisa Ann Coleman guilty of capital murder. After sentencing, Coleman spent many years on death row. Her lawyers filed appeals in state and federal courts. Judges reviewed the evidence and legal arguments multiple times. Every court ruled that the trial was fair and that the sentence followed the law. On September 17, 2014, Lisa Ann Coleman was executed by lethal injection in Huntsville, Texas. With her execution, she became the 6th woman executed in Texas since 1982. Case 16. Kelly Renee Gissendaner's execution took place in Georgia and made history because women are very rarely executed in the country. Her case became widely known because she did not kill anyone with her own hands, yet she received the death penalty. Her story is now an important part of the history of women executed in the United States. Kelly Renee Gissendaner was born on March 8, 1968. She grew up in Georgia and later married Douglas Gissendaner. Together, they had children. Over time, their marriage became unhappy and filled with problems. By the mid-1990s, the relationship had broken down. Kelly began a relationship with another man, Gregory Owen. This relationship would later become central to the crime. Kelly Renee Gissendaner became connected to a murder that took place in February 1997 in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Douglas Gissendaner was found dead near a rural road. He had been stabbed many times. At first, police believed the killing might have been random. That belief did not last. Investigators learned that Gregory Owen had carried out the stabbing. He later confessed and led police to Douglas's body. Prosecutors said the killing was planned ahead of time. Kelly Renee Gizendanner did not stab her husband. However, prosecutors argued that she planned the murder and pushed Gregory Owen to commit it. They said she helped choose the location and knew exactly what would happen. Because of this, the state said she was the main decision-maker in the crime. In 1998, Kelly pleaded guilty to murder. The judge sentenced her to death. Gregory Owen received life in prison with the possibility of parole. This difference in punishment became one of the most discussed parts of the case. Kelly Renee Gizendanner spent more than 17 years on death row. During that time, many people said she changed in meaningful ways. She became deeply involved in religious study and completed a theology program while in prison through Emory University's Candler School of Theology. Teachers and prison staff described her as calm and respectful. Some said she helped other inmates and showed real remorse for what she had done. Because of this, many people believed she no longer posed any danger. Kelly Renee Gizendanner received strong support from religious leaders, prison workers, and people who had once supported the death penalty. They asked Georgia officials to spare her life and change her sentence to life in prison. Her case reached national attention during her final years. Her execution was scheduled more than once in 2015 and delayed. One delay happened because of problems related to execution drugs. Despite these delays and many appeals, the courts allowed the execution to move forward. Kelly Renee Gizendanner asked for clemency. Her supporters sent letters and spoke publicly. They focused on her behavior in prison and the fact that she was not the person who carried out the stabbing. Georgia officials reviewed the case and denied clemency. Once that decision was made, there were no legal barriers left. Kelly Renee Gizendanner was executed on September 30, 2015, at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. She was 47 years old. Her execution made history because she was the first woman executed in Georgia since 1945. Case 17. Lisa Marie Montgomery was put to death by lethal injection at the Federal Correctional Complex in Terre Haute, Indiana. Her execution is part of the short and serious history of all women executed in U.S. history, and it stands out because it was carried out by the federal government, not a state. She was the first woman executed by the federal government since 1953. Lisa Marie Montgomery was born in 1968. Her life before the crime was marked by long-term abuse and deep mental illness. Court records showed she suffered repeated physical and sexual abuse starting in childhood. As an adult, doctors diagnosed her with serious mental disorders, including psychosis, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and brain damage linked to trauma. These facts were presented many times in court and became central to later legal battles. The crime happened on December 16, 2004, in Skidmore, Missouri. Lisa Marie Montgomery traveled from Kansas to visit Bobby Jo Stinnett, a 23-year-old pregnant woman who was 8 months along. The two women had met online through a dog breeding forum and had exchanged messages over time. Bobby Jo believed the visit was friendly. Inside the home, Lisa Marie Montgomery strangled Bobby Jo Stinnett to death. After killing her, she cut the unborn baby from Bobby Jo's body and took the child with her. The baby survived and was later found alive and returned safely to the victim's family. Lisa Marie Montgomery was arrested the next day. She admitted to what she had done because the crime involved kidnapping that resulted in death and included crossing state lines. Federal authorities took control of the case. This meant it would be tried under federal law, not state law. In 2007, a federal jury found Lisa Marie Montgomery guilty. Prosecutors argued that the crime was planned and deliberate. The defense presented extensive evidence of her mental illness and long history of abuse. Mental health experts testified that she lived with strong false beliefs, including the belief that the baby was her own. Despite this evidence, the jury sentenced her to death. Lisa Marie Montgomery spent many years on federal death row. During that time, her lawyers filed repeated appeals. They argued that her mental illness was so severe that executing her would violate the law. Courts reviewed medical records and expert testimony and acknowledged that she was seriously mentally ill. Even so, judges ruled that she met the legal standard for execution. Her appeals were denied in federal courts and by the U.S. Supreme Court. In the final days before the execution, her lawyers asked for clemency from President Donald Trump. They also sought emergency court orders. A brief delay was granted, then lifted. The execution moved forward. Official records from the Federal Bureau of Prisons confirm that Lisa Marie Montgomery did not make a final verbal statement. Her attorneys later said she expressed remorse and asked that people pray for Bobby Joe Stinnett's family. On January 13, 2021, the execution was carried out. Lisa Marie Montgomery was 52 years old. Her death marked a rare moment in U.S. history. She became only the fourth woman ever executed by the federal government and the first in nearly 70 years. Case 18. Amber McLaughlin's execution came almost 20 years after the crime, following a long and complex legal process that drew national attention. Amber McLaughlin was born in 1974. At the time of the crime, trial, and original sentencing, court records listed her under her legal birth name, which continued to appear in some official documents, including parts of her prison record and death warrant. After her 2006 conviction, she transitioned while in prison and later lived as Amber McLaughlin. Missouri officials publicly recognized her gender identity at the time of her execution, while some legal records still used her earlier name. The crime that led to her death sentence happened in November 2003 in St. Louis County, Missouri. The victim was Beverly Genther, a 45-year-old woman who worked at an office building in Earth City, Missouri. Court records showed that Amber McLaughlin became focused on Beverly Genther and stalked her at her workplace. This pattern of behavior was central to the prosecution's case. Evidence presented at trial showed that on the night of the crime, Beverly Genther was attacked, stabbed, and later pushed from a bridge into a creek. Her body was discovered the next day. The killing shocked the community and led to an intense investigation. Surveillance footage, witness statements, and physical evidence connected Amber McLaughlin to the crime. Amber McLaughlin was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She was also charged with and later convicted of forcible rape, a fact that played a major role in how prosecutors presented the case. During the trial in 2006, prosecutors argued that the combination of stalking, sexual assault, and killing showed extreme violence. They used this to support a finding of depravity of mind, which Missouri law required for a death sentence. The jury found Amber McLaughlin guilty of murder and forcible rape. Under Missouri law at the time, the judge, not the jury, decided the sentence. After reviewing the case, the judge sentenced her to death. This judge-imposed sentence later became one of the most important legal issues in the case. Amber McLaughlin spent many years on death row. Her lawyers filed repeated appeals in state and federal courts. These appeals focused heavily on mental health and developmental history. Her legal team argued that she had suffered from fetal alcohol exposure, serious childhood abuse, and long-standing mental health problems. They stressed that this information was never presented to the jury during the original trial. In 2016, a federal court agreed with part of this argument. A judge ruled that McLaughlin's trial lawyers had provided ineffective assistance of counsel by failing to present critical mental health evidence during sentencing. As a result, her death sentence was overturned at that time. That decision did not end the case. The state appealed the ruling. In 2021, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals reversed the federal decision and reinstated the death sentence. The appeals court ruled that the original sentence could stand under the law. This ruling cleared the path for the execution to move forward. In the final months before her execution, Amber McLaughlin's lawyers filed clemency requests with Missouri officials. These requests again raised the issues of fetal alcohol exposure, childhood abuse, mental illness, and the long time she had already spent on death row. Missouri officials reviewed the requests and ultimately denied clemency. On January 3, 2023, Amber McLaughlin was taken to the execution chamber and executed by lethal injection. With her death, she became one of the very few women executed in the United States since capital punishment resumed in 1976. Her execution also drew attention because she was the first openly transgender woman executed in the United States, a fact widely reported at the time. Thank you for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I publish interesting true crime videos on the channel daily.